We're next going to talk about the treatment pillar. The treatment pillar focus is to assist people who are dealing with a substance use issue to find services ranging from a philosophy of total abstinence to one that focuses on managing their substance use toward an ultimate goal of abstinence. Speaking to us on treatment will be Tom Ritchie from Libertas Treatment Center and Brown County Assistant District Attorney Bo Lee Joyce.
And what I want to talk about tonight is warning signs of addiction, drug abuse, and also the progression of addiction. One of the things that I do in my job is we have young people coming in for assessments and treatment, do a drug chart assignment. And that lists the age of their first use, which generally is at age 12 or 13, the amount of drugs that they're using, and the frequency. And when I became concerned was when I started seeing prescription opiate medication show up on these drug chart assignments, because early on in my career, the main people that I saw that were dealing with addiction to opiate type medications were people working in the medical professions, such as pharmacists, doctors, dentists, professionals had access to this medication, or people that had a loved one in their home that was dying from cancer that had access to it. But other than that, that was pretty much it. And if we saw somebody who was dealing with opiate prescription, they were coming somewhere from a big city. And when I started seeing 13, 14, 15-year-old kids putting these prescription pills on their drug chart, what that told me, there was enough access to these medications that high school kids were getting it. You know, so what are the warning signs to look for? Well, drugs are expensive. If there's things, there's items, there's money that's missing out of the home, you have check blanks missing. If somebody's forging checks for drugs, there's something going on. If you're finding paraphernalia in the home, what are they going to say? Well, I was holding that for a friend. It's not mine. We didn't just find it in the hallway at school. It wasn't just laying in the park. It got in the bedroom or it got in the backpack somehow. But most of the time, we as parents or family members, we want to believe that because we want to stay in denial and we don't want to recognize that there's a problem going on. If there's changes in physical demeanor, if one thing you got to look at is what do the eyes look like? You know, the eyes are the gateway to the soul, right? One thing I noticed with my clients, if they relapse or they use, they're still themselves, but a little bit less so. I can see that change, and they're not going to connect with me. They're not going to look me in the eye, and I want to be doing the same thing with my kids when they're coming home. If you're finding paraphernalia, if you're finding these things in the room, call, ask questions. Get some help, because a lot of times when there is an arrest, a legal charge that happens, it's a snapshot. Now, what's the story I get as a counselor if it's underage drinking? How many times did they drink? Once, right? If I got one OWI ticket, I did it once. What's a snapshot? So in most cases, it's going on more than that one incident. The other thing that you already heard tonight is changes in friends, changes in peer group. Strange odors in the house. You know, a lot of times where there's smoke, there's fire. If it doesn't look like it's paraphernalia, it could be paraphernalia. If you don't know, ask. You can call me at work at Libertas. My phone does not ring enough, okay? And that's the message that I'm trying to send, is that we have counselors out there, we have treatment providers, and the phone is not ringing enough. Law enforcement is getting plenty of calls and they're arresting people, but we need to be doing something ahead of time earlier on in this process and getting people engaged in some help. The person can't change until they want to. That's a lie. That's a myth. That kills people. If you really go back and you interview people that are in recovery and you found out what got them there, it was probably some type of crisis, some kind of intervention, some kind of incident that got that person in recovery. They weren't just driving down the street and all of a sudden they said, hey, I guess I'll go get some help today. Why is it so hard to identify? Well, you have the denial piece going on. Early in the use, they're very secretive. And then once the person realizes they have addiction, there's a lot of shame and guilt. A lot of times people do not realize that they're going to be involved in some things they don't want to be involved in, and a lot of times it's young ladies that get involved in sex trafficking. They're in a vulnerable situation. They get involved in drug dealing, and it gets them in a very bad situation very early on in their addiction. And that's the hard part of this is, you know, how do we get these people into treatment before there's really bad consequences happen before you get to the point where there's physical withdrawal. And that's the hard thing. And that's really the message that I wanted to send out to people. So watch for those warning signs. If you are a friend or family member, you do have questions, you do have concerns, we do have a friends and family group on Thursday nights at 6 o'clock for education, and that's free to anyone interested in that.